Good evening. Welcome to A1TV, the Mark Show. We're going to go down the path of journalism because it's a bit of a heart, bit of a thing for me. I love it. And one of the greatest guys you'll ever meet in journalism is a guy called Alister Nicholson. Now, he's a Tasmanian. We won't hold that against him. But he's from the northwest of Tasmania, from Penguin. Alister, welcome to the show.
Great to be with you, Stoney. Thanks for having me, mate.
I always look for great stories, and your story is a great story because we're just talking off air about when you and I met. It was in 2001, and you and a guy on Football Life, Dave Sheehan, with the Martin Duffy production, become a journalism at Win TV. But I'm going to start before that, and your time on the northwest coast of Tasmania. Tell me about your childhood and what your dreams were as a child growing up in the northwest of Tasmania.
I just wanted to be a carpenter or a greenkeeper or something like that, something that got me in the outdoors, Stoney. But back in those days, weren't too many carpentry apprenticeships going on the northwest coast. Had a great childhood, heaps of space. We had paddocks over the back fence from where I lived in Penguin. Grew up on 3/4 of an acre. It was just cricket every day in summer, footy every day in winter, radio always on. My dad had one of those old leather-bound transistors, and living on the northwest coast of Tassie, we could pick up the 774 signal. So I'd listen to the footy every weekend and listen to Peter Booth and Tim Lane and Crackers Keenan and all those blokes calling the footy. Could have been champions, all of that kind of stuff. So that planted a little seed. I loved sport. I thought that would be an amazing thing to do, but never thought you could actually find a path into a commentary box at any point. I just loved doing the things that all my mates at the time did, going to the footy every second weekend when Penguin were playing at home and getting dropped off, and then at the end of the day getting picked up again and causing a bit of mischief along the way. It was a great place to grow up. There was always a place to go for a fish. You could play golf without any hassle getting around the golf course, and good beaches about as well. So it was the sort of old school perfect upbringing.
Now, have you been to Dole Park? Because Dole Park's been upgraded in the new Penguin ground. It's not the old Penguin ground, it's the new Penguin ground. I was there a couple of years ago and relived a rivalry with Wigo, and I had a look at it and thought twin ovals, not bad. I used to go to the old Penguin ground many moons ago. AFL clubs should have a look at that. It's not a bad ground, Dole Park.
Yeah, it's fantastic. They've built it to AFL standard. It's got a good community facility there that can be used. Hopefully at some point generate the club some money as well. I think the council hasn't been overly helpful with the deal that they've struck with the football club. But my memories of the old footy ground was the heart and soul of the town, you know. Basically a couple of drop punts from the main street. There was the footy ground and the old Bill Fielding stand. And we'd go down there every weekend and you'd have old Pam Revel in the canteen serving up the hot chips, and we'd be running from one end of the ground to the other to see Brent Plant kicking goals and Brian Brett dominating in defence and Bill Fielding, of course, playing over 400 games. So that was such a part of our childhood. And Penguin was only a small town. It always felt like Penguin had punched above its weight as well when it came to footy. So there was a real sense of pride, community pride in what the football club was able to do.
Is that where you picked up? Because I know, a little birdie tells me, Alister, that you're a very good fisherman, but also you're not a bad golfer. So what's the handicap like at the moment? And you're still getting out and fishing? How did that start as a child?
Yeah, it's a family tradition that at the age of 11, my dad would buy, I've got two brothers, each of us a fly rod. Our first fly rod. We've got a family shack in the Central Highlands of Tassie, right in the middle on Brady's Lake. And my grandparents, when they emigrated from Cornwall in 1967, just in time for the bushfires, they went up over the lakes. They saw the shack. It was an old duck hunter's hut. Very, very basic one-bedroom abode. No heating, no electricity, that sort of thing. They bought it for $400. It's still in the family, and it's only had very minor adjustments made to it. The power's on, that type of thing now, but it's a very basic fishing cabin on a lake, and it's the best place to go. So at the age of 11, I got my fly rod, went up to the lakes with my dad for some one-on-one tuition, and it sparked something from there. So that's one of my great passions, and started playing golf at the Penguin Golf Club at about the age of 13 or 14, and it was just a terrific environment. So many good blokes there, really welcoming. I think it helped me relate to people. You're always playing with someone different every time that you played, so from a social aspect it was really good. Steadily got a bit better, Stoney. The handicap's 4 these days. I've got a battle on my hands coming out of lockdown to try and keep it at that level, because I'm a bit rusty. I haven't swung a golf club for a long time, mate, so looking forward to getting back into it.
It's like riding a bike, Alister. Once you've done it once, twice, 3 times, just go back, pick up the club and away you go. So they tell me, Alister, I'm not a player, but let's move on to the point where you decided that journalism was your go. That you just said, I'm going to make a really concerted effort. How did that start, and how did the process go to get into journalism?
I went to Penguin Primary School, which was excellent. Then I went to Penguin High School for a year, and my parents moved me to Marist in Burnie in year 8. I wasn't overly keen on the idea at the time, but both my brothers had gone the year before, and I'd managed to get out of going first time round. Second time round, they were very keen to get me there. It felt like they wanted me to have a bit more structure around me. I wasn't overly motivated in the classroom. I was very keen to get outside and kick a footy or muck around with my mates. And I honestly didn't know what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a carpenter or a greenkeeper or something like that, but the opportunities to be a tradesman on the coast in those days weren't really there. It's amazing how much that's changed in recent times. And my mum and dad were both very well educated and sort of subtly nudged me down the path of university. Even then, I didn't really know what would suit me. Maybe it was teaching, maybe it was sports science, something like that. And then randomly, the University of Tasmania offered a journalism course for the first time in 1999, and that just coincided with my first year at university, and that seemed like a good fit. And I quickly realised that it was an opportunity to write about sport or record reports about sport, go out and interview sports people, that kind of thing, and that had a lot of appeal. So sort of naturally fell into it. Didn't work particularly hard, as most don't do in their first year or so at university, as they're finding their feet and living away from home as well for the first time, just living with a mate. But second year onwards, I think I knuckled down and started to get some decent results. I feel like it was a very beneficial thing to go to the University of Tasmania. And even though it was a very new course, those that were behind it, Lindsay Simpson, Graham Gates and others, did a terrific job.
We were talking off air before about in 2001 was your first job at Win TV, and I think that's what it was. And where did it go from 2001? Do you remember your first job you went to as far as a journalist?
Yeah, vividly. I did some work placements when I was at university, and one of them was at a community radio station, 92.1 FM in Bellerive in Alma Street, not far from Bellerive Oval. So that gave me a little bit of a hand in broadcasting. I wanted to be a newspaper journalist. The thing I thought I was perfectly suited to was the quiet sort of background role of writing, as much as it's far more prominent these days. But I didn't want any notoriety. I just wanted to report about sport, and the idea of writing for the Herald Sun or the Age appealed greatly. I went through the cadetship process for both of those newspapers and got reasonably close with the Herald Sun, didn't do so well with the Age. And then as I was studying for my last set of exams, I got a call from one of the university lecturers who said to me that there was a position going at Win TV and she thought I would be perfect for it. It was a junior sports reporter, and everything I'd ever handed in was related to sport, really. But I didn't want to work in broadcast. I was too shy to go on television. Wasn't something that I wanted to do, put myself out there in any way. But I also thought if I go and work at a local newspaper, it could be 10 years before I get an opportunity to start working in sport. So I took the plunge, went into TV. It was horrendous to start with. I had a trial day. I still remember the first thing. C7 was doing the Sheffield Shield cricket back in those days. I got asked to do a trial story on a Shield match between Tasmania and South Australia. I did the news report for the news, and they actually put it to air that night. They were happy enough with how it came out. So that was a good sign. And then, I got that position. And basically, as soon as I finished my last lot of exams, I was into it, but definitely not ready for television, learning on the run. Sure, there were some horrendous moments along the way, that's for sure.
You spent 10 years in Tasmania. I think, was it 10 years you spent before you went to Brisbane? Tell me about the transition between what you did in Tasmania and then the transition to Brisbane.
I worked for Win TV as the news presenter and sports reporter for probably 4 years, and then I got a chance to go across to the ABC. And thankfully, the ABC was still doing some TV sport in those days in Tassie. So they were doing VFL football broadcasts, hockey matches. They were calling Sheffield Shield matches and one-day cup matches in cricket on the radio for Grandstand as well. And Peter Newlands was the only Grandstand broadcaster down there.
Yeah.
So from time to time, he needed some help, and my hand was always in the air. If I could do anything associated with live broadcasts of matches, I was all over it. But I had to balance it with my news requirements as well. So I had a really supportive boss at the ABC, Andrew Fisher, also a fly fisherman and a top bloke. He was happy for me to go and call the footy or go and call a cricket match, provided I could still file the updates for the radio news and do a story for the nightly news. So I'd go and call the football, and I'd be time coding as we went in real time. Brett Gapin just kicked the goal over his shoulder, so I could write the news story and find the footage when we got back to work at 5:30 and churn it out on the 7 o'clock news. So that gave me some experience in sports commentary. And then when Jerry Collins retired from his position with ABC Grandstand in Brisbane. He was an outstanding senior broadcaster, Olympic Games, swimming, rugby union, Brisbane Broncos, rugby league, just an outstanding broadcaster in person. I got the opportunity to apply for a job there and ended up getting it. So my family, very supportive wife and young child, made the move. Initially just the one child, then we had our second in Brisbane. So that was the transition. But as soon as I started working in broadcast media, I just started for the first time to see that there might be some sort of a path into commentary, one that I hadn't really realised was there before, but deep within me, I think I'd always sort of carried that ambition as much as I never thought I'd actually realise it.
In those early days, you would have done Tasmanian Devils games because they started in 2001, went through to about 2009, I think it was, around that time. So you would have done early Devils games during that period?
Yeah, I did. I remember the first one I ever did was Tasmania versus Box Hill at North Hobart, and Lee College was the boundary rider, former North Hobart player, and he went in for a nose operation. I'm not sure exactly why, maybe an old breakage from back in the day that needed straightening out, and the director of the football coverage asked me to fill in for the week. So it poured with rain at North Hobart Oval. I rode the boundary. It looked like a drowned rat. Just, it was a shocking afternoon, but a thoroughly enjoyable experience. And then Greg Simpson was the director's name, and he invited me back again the following week. So for the rest of the season, Lee and I did it together. And then the year after that, he sort of elevated me into the position of calling and hosting the coverage with Andy Bennett and Chris Smythe. So that was a very rapid jump from just one-off boundary gig to calling the footy, but it was thoroughly grateful for the opportunity. That was the kind of thing that could happen in a regional area. I think I know with Win TV, I got so many opportunities to do things miles ahead of when I ordinarily would have, purely because I was working in Tassie, where you covered all sorts of different things. You were thrust into uncomfortable environments. I was reading the sport on the news after just a few months, and there's no way I was ready to do it, but it was a great opportunity. And then with commentary, I got some chances early on that were very good to help me show what I could do and also helped me learn the craft.
So you moved to Brisbane, and I was doing, as in research I was looking at, you did mostly football and rugby. How was the transition between, you've done cricket, VFL football, AFL football now, and rugby? How did that go?
Yeah, rugby league was a huge challenge for me because I'd never watched it before and didn't understand the lingo of it. Growing up in Tassie, you might go along to the pub and watch the State of Origin, but you're not really understanding what's happening. What they're trying to achieve, but it's those intricacies that you and I would understand in AFL football. What distinguishes a ball up from a holding the ball decision might be a split second, but you and I both know instantly when we look at it whether it's holding the ball or a ball up. I had none of that in rugby league. And then the language itself, I remember when I got the job in Brisbane, sitting on my couch in Bellreeve Oval in Bellreeve, and listening to a call that Quentin Hull was doing of a rugby league match between the Gold Coast Titans and the West Tigers. And I was literally writing down every second or third phrase that he said and Googling it. What's the goal line dropout? All these different bits of terminology that I had no clue about. So I would do the boundary line or sideline gig when Quentin was calling matches. When I first got to Brisbane, I did it for a year. I'd take a notepad, everything he said that I didn't understand, I'd write down. Every rule or stoppage in the game that I didn't understand, I'd write down, and then we'd discuss it on the way back if we were going from the Gold Coast at Robina back up to Brisbane, or in the car back from Lang Park, having done a Broncos game. And then I'd practice call, and he walked me through it, would listen back, and we'd work on it together. And after a year, I called my first game. So it really did feel like learning another language in a way. And Quentin was an awesome teacher. He's a brilliant rugby league caller. And I ended up doing quite a few rugby league games up there, combining it with calling Brisbane Lions and Gold Coast Suns games and cricket and A-League at the time as well. I did a couple of A-League grand finals. So we were doing all sorts of stuff for the ABC in those days, which was an excellent grounding in broadcasting.
You had moved back to Melbourne. What year was that?
We came to Melbourne it was the football season of 2016. Yeah. The year the Bulldogs beat the Swans. That was the first year full-time in Melbourne.
But didn't you actually commentate at Com Games?
I did. I worked for news. I was working for ABC News in Hobart still at the time. So I went to the Delhi Commonwealth Games as a news journo. So I reported on the games, but I didn't actually commentate the events. We mixed in with all the Grandstand team who were there calling different things. And I got to know Quentin quite well over there. That was a great experience in news to go to Delhi and experience that and report on a very large live event like that was fantastic. And as much as I was there reporting for news, it still had elements of sports broadcasting in it, doing, mix zone interviews, all that kind of stuff.
What sport did you do, Alister? What did you cover over there?
I did everything that was going, just a roving runner, really. If I was needed at the swimming, I'd be doing interviews after swimming races. And if I was needed at the weightlifting, I'd be out there doing something. I was going to press conferences. Wherever there was, something that was newsworthy, we would, myself and a couple of others, Neil Cross from Adelaide, and John Taylor, who headed up the radio coverage, we would have a discussion about who was going where. I was there when Sally Pearson was disqualified from the hurdles at the Delhi Commonwealth Games in 2010. I remember waiting in the corridor afterwards for her to come out and speak to the media, and she gave this most emotional press conference. It was amazing to be there and to see it. She felt like she'd been completely done over, and her emotion was really raw. And so that was a big story that came out of the games. I haven't thought about it for a long time, mate. That was a fantastic experience.
Then you come back to Melbourne. So what brought you back to Melbourne? And because your career has flourished, like I'm watched in amazement that your career, how it's flourished. You come back to Melbourne. People don't realise the time you spent in Tasmania, the time you spent in Brisbane. Now you're back in Melbourne and you're popping up everywhere. So what brought you back to Melbourne? You're doing unbelievable things at the moment.
Oh, thanks, mate. I appreciate it. I'd always wanted to predominantly call AFL footy. So as much as I loved the experience of calling rugby league, it was good fun and a great challenge. And Brisbane offered up a fantastic lifestyle. Melbourne was always the place that I yearned to be working in. Like, I called a game or two at the MCG prior to moving to Melbourne full time to work. And I remember the first game I did at the G was GWS versus Melbourne, and there were 21,000 people there, which doesn't seem like a real blockbuster. But to me, the sheer feeling of walking inside the MCG and going into that commentary box, and the ABC box being bordered by the 7 box and Dennis Cometti and Bruce are over here, and you've got Tim Lane with 3AW over there. It was completely overwhelming and still one of the great broadcasting highlights of my career. So I had that experience before, and I wanted more of it. I wanted to be calling more footy at the MCG, and I wanted to be able to focus on doing that. So even as a youngster, Melbourne was my favourite place to go. I remember my parents took us overseas in 1994 when I was about 13, and we went around Europe and Wales and England, where my relatives are, for 3 months or so. And when we came home, I think my dad asked me what I thought of it all, and I said, well, next time, can we just go and watch the footy in Melbourne? Because that's where I wanted to be. I just loved going to Melbourne, loved going to the footy, and yeah, that was ultimately my career goal. Initially was to work as a print journo in Melbourne if I could. And then when I got into broadcasting, I was still really keen to try and come back to Melbourne to cover some of those really big sporting events. There's nothing like it, as you know well, mate, walking and going into the MCG when there's a massive crowd for Friday night football or a final. It's completely unrivaled.
I do have a privilege that I do see Alister most times when I'm at the G working in the MCG. He's part of the event staff, and Alister walks past me, and it is a bit of a buzz when you work in there with the media in there, because you've got the who's who of media, the people that you used to look up to. Now you call with those people as part of Grandstand. ABC Grandstand has been amazing for you. Alister, it's given you opportunities to call football and just, Jim Maxwell and cricket. I've seen you at cricket, and you must pinch yourself sometimes.
You do. You definitely do. And when you first do it, you genuinely feel like a bit of an imposter. You feel completely out of place when you see these giants of broadcasting and the ex-players that we see in those corridors as well. It's pretty overwhelming that you're in that kind of company. So for me, that drove me to make sure that I was taking every single opportunity and treating it with the utmost respect and doing the best job that I possibly could to try and fit in and demonstrate to those great broadcasters or former players that, I was capable of doing the job to a decent level. And yeah, there are definitely times where you're sitting at sporting events, that moment at a big game where the anthem finishes or the siren sounds and the roar of the crowd, and you literally get a shiver down your spine. It's sort of an unbelievable experience. And the first few words that you say in a broadcast are some of the most nervous that you will ever have in your career. So yeah, I think the minute you start taking it for granted or you become a bit complacent about what you're doing, that's going to show in your performance, and that's certainly not what I ever want to do.
So before we move on, I want to take you back. How many Sydney to Hobart yacht races did you cover in your time in Tasmania?
I think I did. I mean, I would have covered probably 8 or 9, and for the ABC as the national reporter, flying in the chopper over the fleet and covering it, probably 5, with the late Gary Ticehurst, who unfortunately went down in that chopper accident. He was an one of the best people I've ever worked with in my entire life. So generous, would have me around for Christmas dinner because I was away from family at Christmas.
Really?
Looked after me so well, just a magnificent pilot. But we'd get all the pool footage for the different networks and we distributed all. But those amazing sunrise shots where you'd fly out at 6 a.m. and be 85 nautical miles out to sea looking for a toothpick on the horizon somewhere, trying to find the yacht off coordinates. It was so much fun. It was a real thrill to cover. I wasn't a yachtsman. I didn't know an awful lot about it, but I really did grow to appreciate the race, particularly the handicap race where you've got these little boats that are, might take a week to reach Hobart, yet they're still fighting for those handicap honours on corrected time. It's a really special event. It was good fun to cover. And yeah, those times that I had with Gary Ticehurst were times that I really cherish.
Now we'll move forward, and Channel 7 and recent times of the BBL, WBBL, calling cricket. Seems like a lot of fun, Alister.
Yeah, it's great fun. They've been an awesome organisation to work for. First opportunity I got to do some stuff for 7 was the Canberra Test match a few years ago when Australia played Sri Lanka, and David Barham was the head of cricket at the time and really just took a punt on me. He wanted to give me a shot at doing a Test match. So I'm very grateful for that opportunity. And then Chris Jones, who now heads up 7 Cricket, has been an absolute champion of mine, so supportive. He's given me opportunities on BBL, WBBL, Women's Internationals, and really got behind me and made me feel like I've got something to offer them in commentary. So I think it's a real privilege to work for them. I got to do the Olympic Games 7 as well, which was awesome, given the ABC no longer does the Olympics anymore, to call the hockey for them and do the diving as well at the recent Tokyo Games was a very special experience. And there's just a great sense of team within that organisation, which I really love. They really get behind you. There's some very prominent people there, but their utmost thoughts are making the overall product great and getting behind you and making you feel good about yourself. So I've only sort of worked in that environment for the last few years, predominantly on cricket, but yeah, it's been a fantastic place to get some opportunities.
If my calculations are right, you started in 2001, we're in it now 2021, nearly 22. Hopefully next year's a better year as far as COVID goes. 20 years in industry.
Ridiculous.
That's amazing, Alister. Mentors.
Ridiculous. Mentors.
Have you got any mentors?
Yeah, I have had mentors across my career. Most significant in broadcasting, I think Quentin Hull to start with. When I first got to Brisbane, he really took me under his wing and just showed me the ropes and taught me. He had a very clear understanding of the skills around broadcasting, what made a good broadcast, what your role as a commentator was, how you made experts flourish, how you helped them shine, never stole their thunder, how you captured big moments, all of that kind of stuff, and taught me how to call rugby league, which was something I had no idea how to do. And he really invested in me. So he was a fantastic colleague to work with. And then at the latter stages of my time in Brisbane, I sounded out Gerard Waitley, and Gerard helped me for a few years, initially in Brisbane. And then when I got to Melbourne as well, he was a great mentor to me and probably sharpened up my commentary a little bit. I think I often was content just to be at the game. It was the thrill of being there and the excitement of doing it, and my main focus was get the players right, describe where the ball is, give the score, all of those things. And he helped me a lot around building storylines within games, creating a sense of drama, capturing moments better, really thinking more deeply about the craft. And I suppose it was a natural evolution in my experience as well. With Quentin, I was probably at the start of my career and in the developmental phase, and then by the time I started working in Melbourne, and Gerard was, helping me with my growth as a broadcaster, I'd have sort of established the basic skills, and it was about building on top of those. So yeah, it was those two guys I would say have had the most significant influence on me. And then there are huge influences just purely from a listening perspective. I listened to so much radio and TV over the years. So, Drew Morfitt, Tim Lane, those kind of guys, listening to them. Dennis Cometti, I thought was just a brilliant commentator. Anthony Hudson today, you listen and you watch them and you pick up little things that they do so that they're not mentors to you, but they are shining examples of how you go about it.
2 more questions. Where'd you meet your wife?
This is going to make you laugh, Stoney. This is really going to make the uni bar in Hobart. Yeah.
Really?
But I really only had a very brief conversation with her there, and then had a much better conversation with her at that favourite night spot that everyone goes to in the early hours of the morning, the Great Mykonos in Sandy Bay Road.
Really? Is that right? What year was that?
That would have been, now you're testing me, maybe 2004, 2005,
really?
That kind of thing. Yeah.
There you go.
So way back when. We hit it off, we had things in common, and Oh, she's been an absolute legend, mate. Moved twice for my career when we've had a young family, and she has been established in her own career and doing great things in the environment she's been working in. Always lands on her feet, as I always tell her she will.
What does she do, Al?
She works in communications and marketing. So she was working with tourism in Tasmania and worked in government in Queensland and now working for Monash University in Melbourne. So yeah, she's very capable, always lands on her feet, but I don't for a second forget the sacrifices that she made to allow me to chase my dream.
Probably just 2 more questions. How many kids you got?
Got 2 boys. Yeah, two
how
boys. 8 and 11. It's a lot of fun. Yeah,
sports
love
people.
Sport, love footy. Yeah, they love footy, they love cricket, absolutely obsessed with cricket. One of the great things that's going on that I'm noticing at the moment with all the women's sport that's on free-to-air television, just how genuine their interest is in the women's game. So they go for the Hobart Hurricanes. If the men are playing, they talk about they barrack for their team. If the women are playing like they have been at the moment, they're cheering Rachel Priest making 100 yesterday. They're glued to the television watching the Hurricanes. Same with the footy. One goes for Richmond, one goes for Brisbane because he was out there when he started following football and being a Tasmanian. I know what it's like not to be able to go and watch your team play regularly. So I was happy enough with that. But it doesn't matter whether it's men's, women's. They don't distinguish at all. It's so different to my upbringing. I think it's a great thing that they just see sport as being sports, Stoney.
Yeah, it might be exciting, Alister, because you may actually see in your lifetime a Tasmanian team.
Mate.
How good would that be?
I hope so. It'd be brilliant. It would be absolutely brilliant. And if you talked to me about this 5 or 6 years ago, it would have felt like a dream, a sort of not necessarily completely unattainable dream, but a long distant dream. To me, it feels like an ever increasing reality. I think this is going to happen. I think it should happen. I think the weight of momentum behind it is so great, and the caliber of people pushing it's undeniable. The business case stacks up, the finances stack up. It stacks up from a social perspective. It stacks up from a moral perspective. The contribution of Tasmania to the game of Australian football as a heartland, it cannot be discounted. So that's one thing, but there's also a business case that Colin Carter has gone through in great detail and determined that Tasmania is deserving of a team. And if a couple of options are off the table, which I think pretty quickly would be in terms of relocation and also joint ventures, he says that a 19th licence is viable. So I love what they've done, that Tasmanian task force, the likes of James Henderson and Brett Godfrey and Paul Erickson and all of those people working behind the scenes, and even Nick Rewalt, who I think many people thought was a Queenslander. He moved out of Tassie at the age of 12. You could not find a more passionate Tasmanian, and I think him lending his voice to the cause has been so significant. So I'm pretty sure it's going to happen, Stone.
The ace up their sleeve, Alister Clarkson.
Yes.
Which is a great
I heard him do an
ace.
interview recently where he literally talked about Tasmania and he used the word "we" about 20 times. So it was, we need to do this, we need to build that. He is fully invested. So who's going to turn down Clarko?
Nobody,
No
not
one.
me. I actually might have to move back if that happens. Let me tell you,
Yes.
it's a little link. I might have to move back. Hey, listen, do you ever get back home?
I haven't as much as I would like to in recent years. Sometimes I get home for footy, for work, and sometimes for cricket as well. And then we do try and get back to Hobart if we can. Occasionally I'll get back to the Northwest Coast, maybe do a function. I've got a good mate who organises some functions for the Rhino Cricket Club. So it's a great chance to go back and mix with some great people who I haven't had a chance to do that with much in recent times. And then every year I have to get to the Highlands, mate, at some point. I have to get into the Central Highlands of Tassie and just, you don't get any phone reception in the shack. It's a place to go and switch off and do some fishing and forget about work and the city and all of that kind of stuff. So get back as much as possible. Feel very deeply connected still to Tasmania and my roots there and my upbringing. It was a fantastic place to grow up. And I don't think you could ever take the Tasmanian out of me as much as some people move and live elsewhere for long periods of time. I think the Tasmanian thing is very much within me and you can't get rid of it.
You don't have to impress me, Alice. I know how good it is as the place. Hey, listen, thanks for joining on the Mark Show, A1TV. Really appreciate the chat, Alistair. It's great being going down memory lane and having a chat about the old days, but you're doing a great job, mate. So well done, and I'll see you at the MCG soon.
Good on you, Stoney. Love chatting to you, mate. Thank you.